people here. So this came out of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and it's an investigative journalist piece they did. After users of a bionic retinal implant, their implant became obsolete after the company that made it went bankrupt. Barbara Campbell was walking through New York City subway station during rush hour when her world abruptly went dark. For 4 years, Campbell had been using a high-tech implant in her left eye that gave her a crude kind of bionic vision, partially compensating for a genetic disease that had rendered her completely blind in her 30s. I remember exactly where I was. I was switching from the 6 train to the F train. I was about to go down the stairs, and all of a sudden I heard a little beep, beep, beep sound. It wasn't her phone battery running out. It was her Argus 2 retinal implant system powering down, and the patches of light and dark that she'd been able to see with the implant's help vanished. And this is something that she had to have surgically implanted into her retina. She's probably thanking God it wasn't her brain, but it's still a defunct system that's now in her retina and doesn't work. And she's in a place like a subway station where I think sight is probably pretty important or you could die. This bionic eye needs a retinal implant that requires a 4-hour-long surgical procedure under general anesthesia where they implant the device, which contains an antenna that picks up signals from a video camera that's placed on the glasses that the patient wears. And it looks like this. It says it's like watching TV on a screen with 60 pixels, but it's enough information to allow people to move around without aid. Unless, like this woman, you're walking down into a subway station and all of a sudden you hear a beep, beep, beep noise and you can't see anymore because your implant just broke inside your body. And it's not just her. This is happening with other people that are having issues with these implants. This guy, Bylan, became kind of a spokesman. It says, because he ended up getting this implant in both of his eyes. So he had an Argus 1 in one eye and an Argus 2, which is the second version of the implant, 11 years later, and he kind of became a spokesman for this company. It says, yet in 2020, he had to find out secondhand that the company abandoned the technology and was on the verge of going bankrupt. So they didn't even tell the guy who had it in both of his eyes, who was basically like their default spokesperson. He didn't even get to know, right? And he says, as long as nothing goes wrong, I'm fine. But if something goes wrong with it, I'm screwed because there's no way of getting it fixed now. And this is another guy, Russ Dewar, second sight patient. It's a fantastic technology and a lousy company. And he just got it in his eye in 2019. So he got one put in there right before everything hit the fan. And it says he was thrilled to learn in 2020 that he was going to be able to get upgrades that might improve his vision further. He heard troubling rumors about the company, so he called his vision rehab therapist. She said, well, funny you should call. We all just got laid off. And by the way, you're not getting your upgrades. So that's a really nice way to find that out, isn't it? And so there are over 350 people now who have this implanted into their eyeball in this world. And this company doesn't exist anymore. It went out of business. And they discontinued this implant and nearly went out of business in 2020. And it says a public offering in June 2021 raised $57.5 million. They were able to raise $57.5 million. But guess what? In today's day and age, that's like they could barely afford office furniture or whatever with the way people run some of these businesses. So that $57.5 million was just not enough. And that's the thing. You could get one of these things put into your body by $1 billion company or a multi-billion-dollar company. But does that mean you can rely on that company and they're just always going to be there and they're not going to have some corrupt person running it who screws everything up or some accounting person who doesn't know how to account for the finances in the proper way or what for whatever reason, right? And the thing they talk about later in this whole long article about the history of this company, everything, these implants, the Argus 2 is a $150,000 implant. In fact, getting the whole thing where you get it put in, you got the surgery, the device, and the rehabilitation needed to use it properly is $500,000 is how much this costs. And it says 80% of it is covered by insurance, but still. That person basically spent $100,000 for something now that if it doesn't break, they're lucky. If it does break, they're completely screwed. And that's being in a horrible position where you're blind and you are being promised something approximating sight, which I can only imagine would be really tempting and very hard to turn down. It's not really the same as people just really like to talk on their phone a lot and they really like to check Facebook a lot, so let's just put that in the brain. That's a little different. But it happened to these people, and this is awful. This is really awful. I cannot imagine what it would be like to be blind and being aided by something I had to go through a painful surgery to have put into my head and spend all this money on, and be walking into a subway trusting that company and trusting that technology is going to work. And then if it doesn't, I might accidentally walk off the subway platform and get hit by a freaking train. That's crazy. And it even goes on to say that this guy, a senior fellow in vision science named Aries Arditi, was a principal investigator for the Argus II clinical trials. And he said he did a research study that included all the US participants and showed, quote, weakness with the device's vision quality. And he says Second Sight wouldn't let him publish or present the results, because that's a lot of how science works on a corporate level these days. And the company says it disagreed with his analysis and so discouraged him from publishing it, which, by the way, is not science.